This is Skyblock, the most famous map in Minecraft history. It's already a challenging enough task. In it, you have to survive with strictly limited resources on just 2 islands. However, what if we remove the second island, the tree, the chest, and all the blocks, leaving nothing for beta except a single block? Would it be possible to beat the game? This was the challenge proposed by the YouTuber People, a really nerdy guy with an insanely impossible challenge, because he didn't use any data packs, didn't use mods, it was all pure vanilla 100%. It's no wonder that the original video already has an absurd 30 million views. When we talk about Minecraft challenges, it's easy to imagine, for example, playing without a pickaxe or playing without armor, but what people set out to do is simply insane. How do you get wood, for example? The most basic and essential resource in the game. Well, the answer was a zombie. A very specific zombie. A zombie holding a shovel. Why? Hold on, we're about to find out. For those who don't know, looking at the game's wiki, the zombie has several random drops that a lot of people have no idea about, and that's exactly what our YouTuber was looking for. The problem is, for mobs to spawn, the player needs to move away from the block, since mobs don't spawn very close to players. However, if he moved away by jumping into the void, the time he spent taking damage down there was too long. It was too slow, which made any mob that was up there end up despawning because he was too far away. People needed to die exactly within this window to have a chance of finding the zombie on the grass block. That's why the initial plan was kinda desperate. He decided to starve himself to reduce his health, so that when he jumped into the void, he would die almost immediately, keeping the chances of finding a mob on the grass block. And this was the perfect moment to mention the main rule of his gameplay, which was that he could use backups. With that in mind, he immediately jumped into the void, and as expected, he wasn't lucky the first time. So, he went back to the backup where he was already low on health and jumped again and again and again and insanely again. This could literally take months. That's when he applied the second rule of the game. He increased the game's tick speed, making everything 500 times faster. In theory, this would increase the chance of mobs spawning. And with this boosted tick rate, he even managed to see a skeleton spawn, but the creature immediately killed him and despawned when he fell into the void. Not even with the game sped up 500 times was he able to make any progress. And Beepo considered for a moment that maybe the challenge was impossible. Just as he was starting to feel discouraged, it happened. After another 2 hours and 7 more attempts, he finally heard a zombie, and quickly he backed up the world to make sure he wouldn't lose that first breakthrough. But of course it wasn't that easy. The zombie wasn't holding anything. However, it was a start. Soon after, a creeper appeared, and to top it off, it blew up the entire island. Things weren't easy. Basically the Spider-Man of Minecraft, without a girlfriend, without blocks, without anything. On attempt number 1000, and he had already lost count, people saw a second zombie spawn, but again, without the darn shovel. And from then on, things just went downhill. And at that moment, he decided to try a new strategy. By this point, he had already spent about 50 real hours just trying to get this specific zombie. That's a lot of love for the game. And now let's move on to a new strategy, which consisted of increasing the game's tick rate even more to 10,000, but this time with the intention of bugging the zombie's attacks, so it wouldn't kill him instantly, since with the tick rate increased, even the mob's attacks get faster. And that's exactly why the strategy hadn't worked last time. It was a risky plan, but it was all he had at the moment. And it was at this stage that things started to get more interesting. Among thousands of attempts, people saw several different mobs appear. Pigs, chickens, more zombies, until suddenly, during attempt number 18,021, it finally happened. Desceu.
Ooh, zombie. Zombie check. Let's see what we got. I'm so excited too. Oh. No way.
No way. Beepo could hardly believe it, and immediately backed up the world so he wouldn't lose this miracle, and then went to take a shower, I hope. But then another problem came up. How to get the shovel without letting the guy fall into the void. The solution was pretty creative. He decided to wait for sunrise, logging in and out of the game to advance time slowly until the zombie started to catch fire in the sun. And when the zombie was almost dead, Beepo would deliver the final blow, making sure the shovel would fall on the block, because the zombie only drops the item in the game if he's defeated with the hit. And on the first try, he was too early, punching the zombie too quickly before it had taken enough damage from the fire. On the second try, the zombie burned completely, and after the hit, the shovel fell into the void. Beepo couldn't believe his bad luck, but he didn't give up. He loaded the backup and tried again and again and again. As Captain America would say, he can do this all day. It was only after several attempts that he finally got the first tool in the game. More than 50 hours and thousands of attempts later, and with that shovel in hand, Beepo was able to do something crucial. turned his only grass block into a snow block when it started snowing. For that, he needed to patiently wait for a snowstorm, something that didn't happen often. And when it finally snowed, he collected the snow with a shovel, getting his first snowballs. The second layer of snow took longer than expected, but when it finally piled up, he was able to collect more. And after a few more snowstorms, he got his first snow block. And so, my friends, he doubled the size of the world. From one block, now there were two. The minimum progress for a normal Minecraft game. But in our story, it would be crazy to say it was the equivalent of man landing on the moon. Each layer of snow that piled up was an opportunity to collect more material and grow his platform. The process was unbearably slow, but necessary. All square. Beepo's next target was the Arctic foxes. Why? Because they have a chance of spawning with an emerald in their mouth, which in the long run could be used to trade with the trader. But since not everything is perfect, the enemy of intelligence, the sworn enemy of progress, ended up playing spleef with himself and falling into the void, losing his only shovel. No! 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 And here we go again, looking for another zombie holding a shovel, but now with a bigger platform, a lot more mobs were spawning, and in the meantime, a spider showed up giving him string, and it didn't take long for more zombies with iron shovels to appear, which sped up the process a lot, and after a long time, the Arctic foxes showed up along with a wolf. Beepo named his companion Bernard, and the foxes were Fred I, Fred II, and Jonathan. If there's any Fred or Jonathan watching this video, leave a comment down below. And eventually, what we needed finally happened. Fred, I came closer with something green and shiny in his mouth, an emerald. Beepo offered the spider eye he had gotten, and the fox accepted the trade. It was a huge victory. A chicken spawned and laid an egg. Beepo managed to turn this single egg into a small chicken farm, which would later be important for getting food. Soon after, he found another emerald with a second fox. The collection of resources was growing slowly and steadily. After getting 4 emeralds, the next step was to wait for a trader who could sell crucial items for progress. The problem was that these guys were way too rare, so rare that Beepo waited for days in real life and still none showed up. The YouTuber was getting desperate. He even built a giant platform to increase the chances, but nothing happened. And in the middle of this process, slime started spawning, which was not good at all since they took up the mob cap in the world, lowering the chances for the trader to appear. And things got so frustrating that after months of trying, Beepo started to suspect that something was wrong, and the worst part is, he was right. After doing some research, he found out the reason. There was a bug in the game where traders couldn't spawn on snow layers, and his entire platform had exactly that, snow slabs, because it was constantly snowing. On one hand, the discovery was good because he understood what the problem was. On the other hand, breaking all of that was a tragedy. After breaking the slabs and regretting having expanded so much, the traders finally had a fair chance to appear. And it didn't take long until we saw the first one. Unfortunately, Beepo was offline, which led to one of the funniest and saddest moments in the video, and nothing.
What's up?
Nothing was spread. Didn't he answer anything life goes on without knowing he had? Missed the opportunity of a lifetime. But that's okay, as your ex would say. What the eyes don't see, the heart doesn't feel. The good news is that eventually another trader showed up, but the bad news is that these traveling merchants don't always have what we need. And this first one didn't have anything useful for Beepo, but soon after, a second one showed up selling something valuable, pointed dripstone, an item that would be useful for creating infinite lava later on. And when morning came, Beepo killed this trader and got a bucket. Another essential item for his progression, as we'll understand in a bit. Suddenly, it seemed like his luck was starting to change. Soon after, a third trader appeared, and this one was selling something crucial. Moss blocks. Mappo was ecstatic. With the moss, he could eventually get a tree without having to sacrifice his only grass block. However, just as he finished making the purchase, disaster struck. A creeper appeared silently and destroyed the original grass block. The only block he had started the whole challenge with, the foundation of all his progress, had been destroyed. Luckily, Beepo had a backup from 20 minutes earlier and was able to salvage the situation. And after that incident, he built a protective barrier around the grass block so that accidents like that wouldn't happen again. The problem now was that the last backup was from before he bought the moss, so he would have to wait even longer. And the blessed trader soon appeared, but still no moss. However, there was another interesting item, that rooted dirt, that strange block, which could also be used to plant trees immediately. Now, he would just need an oak sapling, which he quickly got from the trader, and this completely changed the course of the challenge, because with wood, things would tend to flow much more easily. The first thing he did after endless hours and days of gameplay was to make a crafting table, then a chest to store all the accumulated items. At this point, Beepo already felt like a king compared to the beginning of the journey, and with plenty of wood in hand, Beepo was able to take a giant leap in his progression. He built a much more elaborate mob farm with slabs on top of the blocks where mobs could spawn, and a drop that guided them to a collection point where he could safely kill them, a basic and classic mob trap for Skyblock. And the farm worked surprisingly well, allowing him to collect several important drops, including ender pearls and a lot more iron from zombies, and each new resource opened up possibilities that previously seemed impossible. As he himself noted at some point, progress in Minecraft, and especially in this challenge, tends to be exponential. The more you get, the faster you can get even more things, kind of like those Roblox games, those tycoons, which makes this kind of challenge much more interesting. And the next step was to get infinite water. In regular Minecraft, that's trivial, you just need 2 buckets of water, but in the block challenge, every drop of water was way too precious. For that, he needed enough iron to make cauldrons, and with them, he could collect rainwater. The problem was that in the biome he was in, it snowed instead of rained, and snow doesn't fill cauldrons. He had to build a bridge to another biome where it rained, and put the cauldron there to finally collect rainwater. It was a long and dangerous journey, but eventually he made it. And after putting the cauldron in the right biome, Beep waited patiently for the rain. When it finally rained, the cauldron started to fill up slowly. And our hero was so poor, but so poor, that he didn't even have an iron bucket. He had to collect water in bottles, those flasks that the witches from the farm dropped, and then carry several bottles of water back to his base and finally refill the cauldron there, so that he could finally make the infinite water source. And now we're getting into the most complex and at the same time brilliant part of the plan. Bip needed a regular villager for trading, but how could he get one? The only way in a limited world was to cure a zombie villager, and his plan was as follows: get a zombie villager and cure him using a golden apple and a weakness potion. But then we run into another problem. How do you get a golden apple without gold? For those who don't know, when lightning strikes pigs, they turn into zombie pigmen. And to attract lightning, he needed a lightning rod, which is made of copper, and that's dropped by drowned. As you can see, it's a plan with multiple steps, where each step depends on the previous one, and all of them depend on several complicated factors. First, Babe created a trap to drown zombies and turned them into drowned, and after several attempts and many deaths, he managed to get enough copper to make a lightning rod. The next step was to take the pigs he had gathered over the days to the biome where it rained. To do this, he used the leads he got from killing traders and carefully guided them across the dangerous bridge to the rainy biome. And once there, Bip installed the lightning rod and waited for a thunderstorm with lightning. The wait was long and tedious, since thunderstorms with lightning aren't very common, and he had to be present when they happened. And finally, after days of waiting, it finally started thundering and raining. The lightning struck near the pigs, turning most of them into zombie pigmen. Some pigs were lost when the fire from the lightning spread, but Bib managed to put it out quickly with water. He killed the zombie pigmen, and after repeating the process a few more times, he got 16 gold nuggets, exactly enough for a golden apple. The plan was progressing perfectly now. All that was left was capture a zombie villager and a witch, so she could throw a weakness potion, which would be necessary for the cure. Bip then built separate traps for each one, using a design that would make both of them fall into holes where they couldn't escape. And capturing the mobs was extremely difficult. Zombie villagers were rare, and getting them exactly where he wanted was almost impossible. The witches were equally problematic because they threw harmful potions at him. And after several attempts and many deaths, Bip had both. And now came the most delicate part, positioning the zombie villager so that the witch would throw a weakness potion at him. But this required timing and luck, because witches throw different types of potions. They throw slowness, throw poison, even throw harming potions. In this case, luckily a weakness potion hit the zombie villager, and Bip quickly used the golden apple to start the healing process. After a short wait, the zombie villager turned into a normal villager. It was another historic moment for the challenge, but here came a huge disappointment. Bip thought he could buy a bucket of lava from this villager, but he found out that actually, the villager wanted to buy the bucket of lava, not sell it. All that work to cure the villager was completely in vain. Our hero was really having a rough time. How could he get lava now? Lava was essential to create the Nether portal, and without the Nether, it would be impossible to get blaze rods to make Eyes of Ender, necessary to activate the End portal. It seemed that Beepo Beep had finally found a challenge that his brilliant mind couldn't overcome. That's when an idea came to him. The End portal room in a stronghold always has lava. If he could find the End fortress, he could get lava there. The problem was, how could he find the End fortress without the Eyes of Ender to guide the way? Without them, Bip would have to rely on pure luck. Our hero liked a challenge. If it was going to be easy, he wouldn't even do it. And so he started the bridge block by block in an arbitrary direction. After building almost 2,000 blocks in a single direction without success, he tried another direction. The tedious and exhausting process consumed huge amounts of blocks that he had worked so hard to get. And after a long search, when he was almost giving up on this approach, he spotted it. There was the end portal room floating alone in the void. Beep ran over there and found several lava blocks, exactly what he needed.
Nothing. Oh, I lost a cloud. That looks like an end portal room to me.
By the way, the next challenge would be to transport lava back to the base, which is more than 12,000 blocks away, and making several trips would be extremely tedious and risky, since a single fall into the void would mean losing everything. Instead, Beepo had another brilliant idea, to use bone blocks to create a surface where the lava could stay, and underneath it, he placed the stalactites that dripped into cauldrons. And this system would allow him to generate infinite lava, and after some time waiting for it to work, he managed to fill his buckets with lava, and now with lava and water, it would finally be possible to make a portal to the Nether. But there was still a problem, because there's always a problem. How do you light the portal without a flint and steel? And the solution for anyone playing Skyblock was obvious, use lava. By placing lava and wood strategically, it's possible for the fire to spread and light the portal. And finally going to the Nether, our hero found even more challenges. Since the world was also generated with just one block, there were no fortresses or bastions. The only things that existed were blaze spawners, floating alone in the void, just like the end portal room, but much smaller. And he built several bridges in different directions until he found the blazes, and by setting up a platform below them, finally, it was possible to get the rods. It was extremely dangerous. Several blaze rods fell into the void, and he almost died dozens of times. However, eventually he managed to get 7 blaze rods, enough to craft the necessary Eyes of Ender. And with the Ender Pearls he had gotten from the mob farm, and the blaze rods, Beepo was finally able to craft the 12 Eyes of Ender needed to activate the end portal. And we've reached the most important moment of the story, the final battle. But from that point on, he set a challenge. No more backups would be allowed. It was basically hardcore mode. If he died, it was game over. And when he entered the end, he found a surreal scene. There were no obsidian pillars, no bedrock platforms, just the Ender Dragon flying in the middle of nowhere. How could he destroy the crystals without platforms? How do you face the dragon with nowhere to stand? Just one swipe of its wings and you're done for. But our hero improvised, building bridges, aiming at the crystals, and using his bow. Little by little, there was progress. And every time the dragon got closer, it was a moment of pure terror, because a single hit would completely end the gameplay. He built several layers of bridges to have a better chance of survival in case one was destroyed. The dragon destroyed many of his bridges, almost knocking him into the void multiple times. And after destroying all the crystals with the bow and arrow, he started attacking the dragon directly. And what happened in the end, I'll let you see for yourselves.
He's perching. He is so close. So close. Okay. Oh. Okay, let's go. No.
If you've watched this far, comment the word insane here in the comments, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at eminem.77.